Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this, the Cult Potato Cult Movie Podcast. As always, I am your host, Campion, and joining me is my ever-faithful co-host, Mr. Grady Hooker. How's it hanging?
It's good.
You're wondering where my you're wondering where my unique intro is, aren't you? The one where I dunk on you at the beginning of every episode. You're waiting, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay.
Anyway, what film are we covering today, Grady?
We're covering the 1988 anime hit Akira.
Yes, one of the biggest and most iconic films in not even just anime, but just animation in general. This was back in the late 80s. This was a lot of people, late 80s, early 90s. This was a lot of people's first exposure to anime. This is the thing that really got them started on this, and it's something that's been homaged and parodied in a lot of different things. One shot in particular in this film has been used in every conceivable anime I can think of. Everything from Gurren Lagann all the way down to Pokemon has used the famous Akira bike slide shot in some shape or form. I'm pretty sure most of them have done that, a variation on it.
Yeah, I don't think the fourth movie of this season, the next one we're going to talk about, continues this trend, but really these three movies that we've watched at the start here with Ghost in the Shell, Iron Giant, and now Akira really are those sort of building block referenced everywhere movies that somehow I had not seen at all, any of.
Same here. It's one of those really famous movies that you say you're going to get around to watching, and then you never do.
And now I feel like I have a greater appreciation for a lot of the references and a lot of the things like that. And as you say with the Akira motorcycle slide, yeah, I think it is the most parodied scene ever.
Yeah. Well, homage. It's just a motorcycle slide. There isn't really a lot you can do to parody it. I'm pretty sure I've seen a few where they just do it on a regular bicycle, but that's about it.
Well, yeah, Pokemon doesn't really have motorcycles, so you got to adapt.
Oh no, it does. With
it does?
Officer Genie, because she's a cop. She has a motorcycle.
I haven't seen Pokemon in so long.
I'm pretty sure that shot was well over 20 years ago at this point, Grady. We're very old.
Akira, though, about a lot of things, a lot of stuff packed into this storyline.
Yes.
And
it's almost as if they took a 6-volume manga series and just crammed it into an hour and a half.
They expect you to figure it out really quick, or you will be left behind in the dust.
Yeah, I do have a sort of appreciation for works that don't try to explain everything to you in detail, where they just kind of, expect you to really catch up. Star Wars kind of does this, but then again it kind of doesn't with the opening text scroll. But I think the Mos Eisley Cantina scene always kind of stands out to me as something that it's just hey, here's the kind of wacky, crazy world that we're doing. I've been playing a lot of Lego Star Wars, Grady. It's kind of on my mind. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm going off in this Star Wars tangent.
No, I guess from someone who has seen absolutely nothing out of the world of Akira, none of the manga, none of the anime, none of the anything, coming into this, my first note was just, I'm being introduced to a lot of concepts and I don't understand any of it. Now having made it to the end of the film, I understand a lot of that stuff at the start, but you're hit off with there's these kids, they're at a bar, now they ride futuristic motorcycles, the town looks to have gone to shit, they're just absolutely murdering these people dressed as clowns, and now there's weird alien children, and the military seem to be running the place, but there's also a secret government. There's just a lot going on in this film.
Yeah, if anything, because don't get me wrong, I did enjoy this movie, but I do have some issues with it. But I think that the opening to this film is really, really strong. It gives you just enough so that you get a sense of what's going on, but not too much, so that you're still left with like this big kind of mystery. Like you want to find out what's going on and what these people are up to and stuff. It really, really drew me in at the beginning, especially since the opening motorcycle chase is gorgeously animated. It's really, really, really pretty.
I as much as like I just called out everything that it did in that opening scene, those are all explained eventually. I will have some gripes about this film and it not explaining things later on, but in terms of that opening scene, it was just sort of a almost like sample platter of everything in the film, and you don't understand what you're eating at all, but eventually they'll tell you.
Yeah. Like, you don't really understand it, but you really just like what they're serving you. It's just like, oh man, I need more of this. I really, really love this.
And they will eventually drip feed that out to you, because it's not all going to come at once, and there are bits from the opening piece that only really like clicked or I figured out way later on in the piece, so you could be sticking around for a little while.
Yeah, and it's they drip feed it to you, and sometimes it just doesn't come at all, and you kind of have to read the Wikipedia article to figure out what's going on.
I watched a grand total of 4 YouTube videos attempting to explain this film to me at the end.
Yeah. Again, it condensed a massive manga series into an hour and a half movie. They're going to the manga wasn't even finished when this film came out, so the manga at the time hadn't explained everything.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily hurt it, but it's very similar to Ghost in the Shell, where there was still just unanswered questions for me at the end of the film. So when this film ended, again, I just jump on YouTube and just try and get somebody with a bigger brain than me to come through and explain, or who may have read the manga or anything like that, and just fill in a few of these gaps that were there.
Yeah, like to put it in context, like the manga itself was 120 chapters.
It's a lot of chapters.
It's a lot of chapters. It finished a good 5 years after this movie came out. So it had a long, it ran for nearly a decade. It's a pretty sizable manga.
And people enjoyed, as far as I'm aware, both the manga and this movie. But I think they did take different twists or different end places that they went to. As you said, because they hadn't finished writing it, so it was real hard for the movie to do that. But
yeah,
hey.
And because I haven't read the manga yet, but as far as I can tell, they did take some things in some different directions. Like some of the characters are altered slightly. Like they stripped out quite a few of Kaneda's and Tetsuo's more negative traits. Tetsuo, he jumps onto the crazy wagon a lot earlier than his actually I think he went crazy later than he did in the actual manga, which was a surprise to me. And he's a lot more from what I've read in the manga, he's a lot more violent and depraved and stuff. He's a much bigger asshole.
Yeah, in terms of just straight up violence, there's a lot of that in this film. It doesn't shy away from that. We smack a biker in the head with a lead pipe and it explodes, or as you say, Tetsuo just explodes and vaporizes a human. But in terms of, I guess, violence towards the quote unquote good guys, that's pretty toned down.
Yeah, or just innocent people in general. Spoilers for the manga, because I read some summaries and stuff of what had happened after what happens at the end of this movie. Apparently Tetsuo still manages to survive, or at least he gets around to sort of building his own little miniature empire of espers and stuff like that, and he starts forcing people into sex slavery and stuff. So it gets pretty dark in the manga, to say the least.
Yeah, there was some pretty dark moments of the movie itself, or parts where you could tell, like, oh, if nothing had happened here, this was going to be pretty bad. But nothing quite like that. In terms of the ending of this film as well, it does seem like it went off on at least a slightly different tangent to that as well. Based on the 6 YouTube videos I watched trying to explain the ending to me.
Yeah. It's okay. It's because there's a lot to unpack here. Like even though it is a very condensed version of a comic that wasn't finished at the time, they still managed to pack a lot of stuff in this. So sort of, I guess what I want to ask, Grady, is what aspect of the movie did you enjoy the most?
Ooh, story-wise,
just anything in general. I mean, I'm just gonna say animation because it's an absolutely gorgeous and even by today's standards, it's fluid and pretty. Okay, so that's your answer too. So maybe it is a bit too easy. Okay, so let's go story-wise and story character. Let's try and stray away from the visuals.
No, I want to talk about how they animated this on ones, Campion. In 1988, they animated this on ones. And I think we were watching 107.
Grady, for the people who aren't aware of what ones are.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
We were watching a 107 facts about or whatever, and it came up, and neither of my partners knew what animating on ones meant, and then that launched me into an absolute just 20-minute speech about animating or shooting on ones or shooting on twos or shooting on fours even. But basically, 24 unique frames per second, which sounds like a weird thing for that to be not normal.
Big deal, because
it is
regular film shoots at 24 frames. So why is this? Why is it important? Why is it impressive that when an animation does it, Grady?
It's just, if you think about most animations, especially at this time, things were shooting on twos. You'd shoot 12 unique frames per second, and you'd have them last for 2 frames each. Yeah. And this film just did so many things, and you're basically animating twice the amount of movie by shooting on ones.
It's a crazy amount of work, especially since this was the 80s, so this is all hand-drawn cell animation. So that's effectively double the amount of work that they did. I mean, even some theatrical films at the time still do that. It's animating on ones, usually that'd be reserved for big budget Disney films and stuff. And even then, I don't... Actually, hang on, before I put my foot in my mouth, I'm just going to see how many...
Quickly Googles how many films were shot on ones versus shot on twos. And this is the weird stuff that I guess... we did film and TV together in high school as a class, and it's just the weird stuff that, I want to talk about. I'm sure people are sitting there going, talk about the story. And I'm like, it's shot on ones, guys.
That's ludicrously impressive for a 1988 film, especially since anime is known for, the sheer number of cost-cutting measures that they take, which is why they can, pump it out so quickly. But, yeah, it's very impressive for a film like this to do that. Even in big budget animated films, you usually get something for a lot of anime. You get a scene or two where it's the animation quality kind of dips, or drops, so that they can save that money for the really expensive scenes later on in the film. Even in films that I really like it's noticeable. Well, not so much noticeable, but have you seen How to Train Your Dragon, the first one?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. It is a beautifully animated film, but you do notice that towards the end, the big fight scene about how when he's fighting the giant dragon, the Green Death, I think it's called, you do notice about how all of the fabric and all the hair and stuff and all the characters is, they're all swooping past and they're getting blown around, about how their hair and their clothing is a lot freer and it's a lot more freeform than it is in other parts of the movie. Not super noticeable because it is a big budget DreamWorks film. But, you get little bits of it here and there. But Akira, Akira, as I should probably be saying. I didn't really notice any kinds of dips in animation quality, which is very impressive.
Yeah, another thing that people will often do is if the characters are very far away from the camera, you can even shoot on fours. So that's even worse. It's 6 frames per second. Because they're so far away, you'll never notice it. Or you'll see an anime...
And they tend to really simplify the design down. Like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, as much as I love it, that anime is very infamous for doing this. Off-model is sort of like... Off-model is on brand for that anime, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, or the very common anime thing is to have the head and the body completely stay still while just the mouths are moving. So all you actually have to animate is a mouth moving. And Akira didn't do that at all either. The entire time, everything is dynamic in the scene. And it really makes it stand out, especially in, 80s anime.
80s animation, in general, it's very impressive. I don't, because I'd heard, Akira, it's this such a technological marvel of a film, and I was just like, oh yeah, whatever, because they say that about a lot of movies, and it doesn't really hold up today. It's very rare that you get an old movie that technologically holds up today. Akira still looks really it's really, really beautiful, and it's so fluid, it's so gorgeous. I don't think I can overstate that enough, to be honest.
But to go back to your previous question, now 10 minutes later of talking about shooting on ones and how beautifully amazing this movie looks, story-wise, I kind of like the arc of Tetsuo. Where he starts off being like, oh, I really want to ride your bike, and nah, go away, little kid, into being in a freak accident, into getting these powers, escaping once, and just trying to leave the city with his girlfriend. That seems like a pretty general thing to do when you escape a government facility. And then, obviously, everything that happens afterwards.
And then he just starts going nuts, and I feel like, because that's a very common trope in anime, where you get a guy, you get someone, and they are suddenly gifted these fantastic and amazing powers, and their life was a bit shitty before, and then they just go absolutely insane, and they just start going on a rampage. I think that I can say that this probably forms the textbook blueprint for every anime I've ever seen, because I'm pretty sure every anime I've ever seen has done that at some point. In fact, a lot of Western media has done that. It's a very common trope in our comic books as well. I think X-Men deals with that with a few mutants who get their powers and then go nuts. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely is referenced as well in Rick and Morty for an entire episode. And yeah, as you say, it might have been the blueprint. I don't know if things came before it or if this was inspired by
I'm saying that. Probably. I'm pretty sure there's even things in mythology where the gods grant some hero some great power and then he goes nuts.
We just say that it's the modern blueprint.
It's a very influential thing, so we can say that a lot of things take influence from this, even if it necessarily isn't, the original.
But that's my my preference out of the story is just what has happened from start to finish. You can look at Kaneda and think, maybe he doesn't actually change a whole lot from start to finish, but you can't argue that Tetsuo changes from start to finish. He goes up and down like a roller coaster.
Yeah. It's and because it's one of those things where because Tetsuo, he does go, crazy with power, and he starts going nuts and just randomly, well, not randomly, but he just starts murdering people and stuff. And it does a really good job of still making me feel sorry for him by the end, especially with how horrific his transformation is at the end of it. It's because it's not often that, because usually when they do characters like this, usually they want them to be unsympathetic, and you might have a tang of sympathy. You never really feel a sort of connection to them, or at least that's how I felt with Tetsuo, because he does start off as pretty weak and small, and he clearly has a lot of insecurity issues, and then all of that just gets kind of jacked up to 11.
Yeah, and as you say, by the end of it, that's why I call it a roller coaster, right? Because it didn't stay up there at the full-on egotistical power madman. He did start morphing and basically begging for death. towards the end of it, and yeah, it wasn't a fun time for the guy. He wasn't just this omnipotent god like he wanted to think he was. He very much started to get corrupted and mutated by the power, literally, not just in a like hue ego way.
Well, there's a bit of that, but then, you know, the whole techno-organic biological horror starts to come in the end scene when they're just like, you know what, let's just throw all the budget at this one scene. And it is horrific.
Yeah, we didn't have enough body horror, so just like triple it all up in the final scene.
Triple's probably understating it. Yeah, it's nuts, and I love that kind of stuff. And it's weird because I've heard numerous people, like, whenever like techno-organic biological horror shows up in something, they're like, oh, you know, just it's like Akira, because that's like the thing they reference. And yeah, I can see why. Especially, I imagine being like a kid in like the early 90s and this being like the very first anime you ever watched. Like, I can see why this would blow your mind. Like, it's definitely one of those things where if you're at a very impressionable age, because as an adult I'm impressed, but I can see, like, if you're at like a very impressionable age, like, why this would stand out so much to you, because there's a lot of crazy things in this film, especially like if you've never seen blood in an animated cartoon before, going from that to this, it's like, because you at that point it was just Disney and the occasional like Warner Brothers cartoon like Bugs Bunny and stuff. But in this, there's like people getting, you know, ripped to shreds. They're getting shot. The scene opens with some guy getting his head smashed in. There's tits. I mean, it's just a lot. It's a lot for a child to take in, and I can imagine some parent being like, "Oh, this is animated. This is for children," and just chucking it on, and then the child being, you know, exposed to this.
I was going to bring that up because this is now the second anime film that you've convinced me to put on the schedule that has had titties in it that I have not been forewarned.
It was for 1 5-second scene, and it clearly was not supposed to be titillating. It was supposed to be like, holy shit, they're going to this poor girl. This is horrible.
Yeah, I would argue that it is worse.
It is so much worse. It's just like, oh shit.
It was, as you say, meant to be a very not fun scene.
No.
And to me, it's also, I guess, the turning point for that roller coaster of Tetsuo, right? Because at this point, he's just wanting to escape the city.
Yeah.
And then that's where it all goes to hell.
Yeah, and he can't do anything for this person that he cares about, and he has to get saved by, you know, Kaneda again. Which is kind of what really kickstarts. But then, like, super boring ending for his girlfriend's arc, because she just sort of gets sucked inside him and ignored. That's what
probably
actually happened to her? Did she die?
As far as I'm aware. There's a few of my gripes with this film is that I know
in the manga she was brutally murdered, but I don't quite know what happened to him.
She got sucked into the flesh. I'm going to assume that's a death there.
Poor baby.
Yeah, it's rough because I look at this film and I'm like, yeah, it's a good film. We got maybe 6 named characters that were important. And nobody else had any sense of character. Title,
which is why I can remember one of them.
Yeah, like if you're asking me to name main characters, you're gonna have Kaneda, Tetsuo, Kei, and Akira. And then Creepy Child number 1, Creepy Child number 2, and Creepy Child number 3.
I remember Ryu, but that's purely because his name is Ryu, like the guy from Street Fighter. That's the only reason I remember who he is.
But like,
I didn't even remember K, so I had one less. So I guess we had about the same.
So many of the characters, unless they were the main or one of those top 5 characters, just had no personality, no arc, no nothing, and were just there as story beats. And unfortunately, Tetsuo's girlfriend was one of those.
I think the only characters who actually get any kind of development, it's pretty much just Tetsuo, Kaneda, kind of the military general, if you want to have a bit of a stretch. The kids, not really. They just confuse me. Yeah, the kids are just kind of... Well, I say that. I looked up how old they actually were, and as per the manga, they're like they're actually like 40. It's just the psychic drugs they were forced to take stunted their growth. That's why they're like all emaciated and stuff.
Yeah, they definitely looked like... When they first came up, one of my partners called them zombies. But it definitely just seemed like aged person in young body. That's definitely how they came across.
Yeah. And the guy in the wheelchair actually had polio, which...
that was never explained.
Nope. Well, I think it's like a manga. In this one, you could infer that the experiments really screwed up his body. Because, like, for the 3 kids, the experiments screwed up their bodies, but for Tetsuo, it screwed up his mind. I think that's sort of the big difference between the 3 of them.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a weird one, right? Because if you're like, oh, how did this all happen? It's like, oh, he just sort of touched the kid. Or crashed his bike into the kid's force field.
And I think it is explained in the movie that the military actually did do experiments on him.
They put him in the cool little machine that did not need to move him around in 3D space to scan him, but decided to.
I bet the animator who would do that, he's just like, why does the table have to move around? Because it'll look cool! But it's going to take me 6 months to do that.
It honestly was like that. From like an engineering perspective, it's like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that.
Yeah, that's why whenever I see, I get the same way whenever I watch like an Iron Man movie and I see all of this crazy impractical technology and like, it looks cool, but I mean, you could just do it on an iPad. I feel like that would serve the same purpose.
Yeah, and it's funny that we've talked about this film. I think we're about half an hour into the episode now, roughly, and I don't think that we have talked about the quote-unquote main character for more than maybe a minute of that.
No, we've talked about Tetsuo and Kaneda.
More Kaneda, like, we haven't really...
Oh, Kaneda himself, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's because Tetsuo is the more interesting... Well, because he's the one who actually has an arc, and he's the more interesting of the two there. Also, he's the one with the psychic powers. He's, like, the famous character from this movie. Like... He's the character who's often, referenced or parodied in a lot of different places. Like, I think the King of Fighters even has a character who is literally just Tetsuo. Literally just Tetsuo in both design and powers. And they wanted to bring him back for the latest game, but they had to change him up completely, give him a new name. He's called Cronin now. He still has a robot arm, but it's like a completely robot arm. So It's different enough. It's different enough. He's got blue hair now, so it's different enough.
That's how you change it. Just bung some blue hair on him and he'll be a completely different human.
Yeah. Well, a few other designs, but that's sort of like the main thing that stands out.
I guess, first off, other than thinking for a while that his name was Canada, and multiple singings of the Canadian national anthem throughout our viewing, I think his motorcycle had more depth than he did. This character was very one-dimensional.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm kind of a dick, but I'm a charming, smarmy kind of dick, so you don't hate me as much.
I'm also a dick that wants to get laid. That's it.
Yes, very much. Although, to be fair, he is a teenage boy, so, that's a very common thing.
Yeah, that is pretty on-brand for teenage boys.
Also, they live in kind of a shithole, so he didn't exactly have the most constructive environment to grow up in.
Yeah, but his motorcycle's pretty cool.
Oh, his motorcycle's dope. There's a reason why it's, like, such an iconic part of the film.
It did have a whole lot of sponsorships on it, though, which I did find hilarious. Throughout this film, there is so many sponsorships on motorcycles, or so many, like, brand names on them.
Yeah. Well, it might honestly just be, like, product placement.
Yeah, I don't know what it was at the time. Now, quite a few of those brands are, like, defunct or not around anymore, and it was just a good little laugh that, like... Because basically the whole concept of this film, right, is that shit went down, World War III happened, and now in 2019, we ride motorcycles with cool sponsorships on them.
Hang on, someone's bound to have made the Akira motorcycle. They have to have, right?
Oh yeah, there's one in Auckland. They had a convention here, Overload. There was a Kaneda cosplayer that was taking photos with a replica motorcycle outside the convention. Yeah, it was cool. I didn't touch it though, because I didn't want to take it off the stand and break it.
Yeah, I mean that's there's a lot of fiberglass, and it's probably just for display, not like an actual motorcycle. So it's probably very expensive.
But yeah, if you're making me list a second favorite character out of this film, it's going to be the motorcycle.
Oh, to be fair, it is a really nice design. It's really cool.
Yeah. I feel like the weakest part of this film, we got to talk about it eventually, is just it's similar to Star Wars in a way, if you want to bring it back to that. It's just the weird governmental, like, power-hungry stuff that's happening in the background. Like, not once could I have given a shit about that. I wanted to see what was happening with Kaneda and with Tetsuo and all of that stuff, and then there's a resistance, but the resistance is working with somebody who's on the government, and then the government's being overthrown by the military, and then this is happening, and I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't help the fact that they do not give enough of the runtime to like properly explain all of that, so it's just very confusing. It's just like, I don't know who these people are or what's happening.
There's a bunch of people that seemingly run the city.
Yeah, apparently the manga like really goes into it.
I don't know if you could have cut it, but you could have definitely chopped up a lot of it. Yeah, because this movie was still pretty long. I remember it being 2 hours, I think.
Oh yeah, like at the time, I think it was like the longest anime ever made.
Yeah, 2 hours 4 minutes is its full runtime.
Yeah, it's quite a long film.
And
which again, for an animated movie being made purely on ones, crazy length.
It's a lot of frames.
I can imagine the poor animators being like, "Wait, we're animating on ones, so we have to do double the amount of work." Yes, but okay. Well, I mean, I guess in an hour-long movie. No, it's over 2 hours. I'm sorry, what? I have children I need to see. Oh, not anymore. We gotta make the motorcycle look cool.
Well, if you think about it, 2 hours is 120 minutes, right? And then you times that by 60, and you get 7,200 seconds, and then you times that by 24 frames, and these animators had to make 172,800 individual frames.
Oh, it's a lot.
But it looks cool.
Oh, it looks so cool. It's very gorgeous. Also, I found out someone who made a real life version of the motorcycle of Akira's of Kaneda's motorcycle, and it's not as cool as I thought.
No.
Although to be fair, the one in here, it's impressive that they made it, but it looks like something someone would make for a cosplay rather than like an actual motorcycle.
Not 1-to-1.
No. Well, it's smaller. It is genuinely small. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an actual motorcycle that runs. It just isn't as impressive or striking. I think it's also the paint job. The paint is a lot more maroonish, whereas the one in the film is a lot more, it's just a really strong and striking red. I put a video of it in there.
Yeah, I've just seen it pop up. I think the other interesting piece for this film is that they don't necessarily tell you what or who Akira is for a while. Yeah. And it was very similar to Secret of Nim, where I'm sitting there going, like, the main characters, I knew nothing going into this film, right? The main character walks out, and I'm like, oh, that's got to be Akira. And then they call him Kaneda, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And then the motorcycle, I'm like, oh, the motorcycle's called Akira. That's what, no? Okay. What the hell?
Oh,
and
if the motorcycle was called Akira, that'd be dope.
That's what I would have done. And then it's eventually a bunch of weird body parts that have been put in jars and kept underground because the government didn't want them to be out and doing anything crazy.
Yeah. And at first you're like, oh, that seems a bit excessive, but then the body parts put themselves back together, and you're like, oh, okay. That's why.
And then the body parts save Tetsuo and take him off to an alternate universe and let him run his own thing over there.
They ascend to a higher plane of existence. Something that happens a lot in a lot of the Japanese media I've consumed.
It's a weird one.
It's a weird one, but it happens.
And I don't know. It seems like it, as much as like Tetsuo's roller coaster of going crazy and then coming off the other end of it. It seems almost like this movie. Like, it started off as just a little bit of gang violence, and then a little bit of crazy people, and then okay, a bit of powers, and then okay, this movie has now gone off the rails. Oh my god, there is body horror. What is happening?
Yeah.
Okay, now they're off on a plane of existence. Okay. Oh, they caused World War III with a Akira bomb that went off. Okay.
Yeah, and then he does it again. And he does it again, and at the end of this movie, I think. Like, that is what happens, right? Like, Akira shows up and blows up the city again for a second time, I think?
I don't think it affects the entire city, but yes, I do think Akira still sets off another explosion in the Tokyo Olympic Stadium that they've rebuilt. My other gripe with this is that we don't exactly explain the world. Like, we know that World War III happened, which included an explosion of Tokyo, and now there seems to be a rebuilt Neo-Tokyo. But, like, is the rest of the world normal? Are they all exploded as well? And there's a lot more of that in the manga. A lot more of the setting is explained in that as well.
We know that this takes off in the far-off distant future of 2019.
A whole 3 years ago.
A whole 3 years ago, in Neo-Tokyo. Although it was funny. Did you catch the line about how when they talk about the Olympics needing to be cancelled at the end of 2019? It's just and apparently in the manga there actually was something about like a recent viral outbreak that had happened, and the World Health Organization was being criticized in their approach to it. And It's just like, wow, so it's not just The Simpsons. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Obviously not cool, COVID, but I don't know. This movie just ticks so many boxes of so many different things, and like, I'd watch it again, and that's a pretty high praise for movies we've watched on this podcast. There's not a few that got that. It was just, and I think that does come down purely to its aesthetics and the fact that it is a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, like, it's really high energy with all the crazy stuff that they do. And even though it is quite dark and the story does get quite grounded, there's still some strangely wacky kind of stuff in there, mostly the stuff that Kaneda does. Like, the scene when they're when they're infiltrating, like, the secret government base, and they're just like, oh, wait, what's that sound? And when the lift's coming up, and like, wait, what's that sound? And the lift door's open, and Kaneda is just there in the lift on his hover bike that I assume he's had going the entire time. I thought that was really funny, Grady. It was quite good.
Yeah, there was definitely, I think that's why this movie appeals so well. There was laugh moments, there was jump scare moments, there was ooh moments, there was woo action moments. Yeah. Not a lot of movies provide all of those things across the board.
It really runs the gambit of the emotions that you experience.
It obviously has its down points, like we've talked about, whether that be supporting character depth or bits and pieces like that. It feels like with a few tweaks here and there and changing up what does and doesn't get featured, you could probably make this into a perfect 10 out of 10 movie. That is not showing my support for any live-action version of this film.
Yeah, I wasn't too high on a live-action adaptation before this, because live-action adaptations, even especially like Western ones, tend to be pretty crap. But after watching this, I'm just like, there's no reason for this to be live-action. This is perfect animated. Why? No, we don't need one. I'm sorry.
I can't remember. I'm just quickly Googling.
I think, wasn't Taika Waititi supposed to be on it? I know he was attached to it, but he left it to do Thor: Love and Thunder, which I'm glad, because I don't want that movie to be, I don't want a live action Akira to be made.
Yeah, it was Taika Waititi that was on it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. It doesn't really need to get need to be made. I think this is pretty good on its own, and it does well.
Since, like, the thing that makes it stand up for so many people is its animation. So it's like, I don't really see how we can make that translate into a live action film.
Lots and lots and lots of CGI.
Well, they do that anyway in Hollywood movies, and that isn't really impressing a lot of people.
Campion, have you seen Sonic 2?
I've heard it's actually pretty good.
That's going to be such an old reference by the time this episode comes out.
Have you seen it?
No. But that was, I guess, the live action cross CGI piece of what you could do.
You're talking about the original. Yeah, okay, yeah.
It could go well, it could go bad. We'd have to see. But if you told me that the live action version of Akira is being permanently shut down forever, I'm not going to be sad.
Until they can prove that they can get it right, maybe let's not tackle something as difficult to do as Akira. Let's pick something else. Like let's do a live action Hamtaro.
Okay.
Actually, no joke. A Pixar Hamtaro movie could actually be pretty sick.
That's very different to a live action.
I know, that is very different, and I imagine way more people would be open to that than a live action version. It's just, in saying Hamtaro, I realized there was literally no way they'd do that live action. It's like, why wouldn't we just do this animated?
Yep. You could, no, 90% of those things are the hamsters. It'd be pretty hard to pull off. Yeah, I think I have no other massive gripes or massive things to really talk about this film.
It was just a really fun, really interesting kind of ride. And I like how, because I'm a big fan of like body horror kind of stuff in fiction. I just find it really fascinating, and I love the creative ways people can do that stuff. Like The Thing, what was like the last big one for me. But yeah, just like the weird gore amoeba baby at the very end is just nightmarish. And I think the fact that it's so smooth, like it's such a smoothly animated thing, they just made it even worse, because it was like, you know, this is like flesh and like pus flowing like, well, this is like flesh flowing like liquid, and it bothered me a lot. There was a hand made out of many hands, Grady.
Yeah.
And then when all like the organs and hands and stuff started to form into like a baby face, that was a lot.
Yes. I found the stat. It's exactly 160,000 single pictures. So my 170k was a little bit off. But also to mention with this film that we've talked about the style and the shooting on ones and all of that. There was 327 different colors in this film, which is record setting, 50 of which were created for this film. Like, so many, when people talk about this movie being groundbreaking in terms of the amount of effort that went into it just looking stylistically beautiful, they're not understating or not overstating it at all. There was a lot put into this.
It's crazy, just the sheer amount of like technical effort that was put into this film's visuals. And we're only talking about the visuals. That's not even, you know, to talk about the soundtrack, which is just as nuts.
Yeah, the soundtrack was crazy, but I don't know. It didn't stand out as much.
Yeah, I'll admit that I lack the sort of like technical musical knowledge to properly explain the soundtrack, but it was incredibly unique for me. Like it's very much its own thing, and I like it had like all the various kinds of chants, which I think they may have been like Buddhist chanting, mixed in with like a whole bunch of other stuff in there. Again, I'm not a music guy, so I don't know. But,
yeah, we'll talk about shooting on ones for 20 minutes. We unfortunately can't talk about the impressive A-sharp note that's used in music or anything like that. But just while you mentioned it there, that was another thing I think that was massively played down in this movie was the religion around Akira. It was like mentioned here and there. There was a couple of characters, like the character who was playing with the beads and being carried around and stuff is supposedly a really large character in the manga that just didn't really get justice in this movie.
I mean, first, you probably could have cut that out, and like that whole subplot out, and it probably would have been fine.
Yeah, I think this almost, as much as it like already isn't the whole thing, kind of needed to be cut down. Like, I feel like you could have done a couple different bits and pieces, but then you're just gonna the runtime is gonna be even longer. So, hey.
Also, you sure this thing's 2 hours?
Official runtime, I believe, 2 hours 2 hours 4 minutes.
I'm looking at 124 minutes.
Okay, Campion, do you know what 124 minus 60 is?
I'm shutting my mouth. I forgot. I forgot that an hour is only 60 minutes.
I'm just gonna let him flounder here.
I thought an hour was 120 minutes. It's not. Is it, Grady?
No, it's definitely not.
It's not. That's 2 hours. I'm an idiot. Please, no one, just ignore me. Please.
How can we ignore you? You're about to spit facts off of IMDb for us.
Yes, of course, as has been with a lot of things that we've covered on this show, this film did not do particularly well on release. In fact, it had, well, at least on Japan, I think it had a budget of around 700 million yen, which I think is around 5.5 million. Just going off the numbers here on Wikipedia. I think there was also like an estimated advertising budget of about 1 billion yen, which is like $9 million? 8 million total, I think. But yeah, it didn't hit. I'm having trouble finding exact numbers, but it didn't do anywhere near as well as they would have liked to in Japan. But then, of course, it got brought over to the West, where on video, where it started to do really, really well. And then it got released onto video in Japan, started to do well over there. It's as we've discussed multiple times throughout this, it is considered, like a landmark piece in Japanese animation, not just on a technical level, but also that it really helped to bring anime to the West. There's a few different titles that have managed to do that over the years. Dragon Ball Z is a very, well-cited later one, but I think Akira is really the thing that, that released anime beforehand, stuff like Astro Boy and I think Ape Man had also been broadcast in the US. But I think this is like the thing that really started to, build the anime fandom that we know today.
And it really did take off. Like, it took this, it built on that, and it just ran.
Yeah. Because, to be fair, there was just nothing else like this at the time. In fact, even today, there still isn't a lot like this. It's insane to think that someone in the 80s, this is their first introduction to anime after living off of, after only being exposed to Disney over there. It's like, oh, hey, do you want to watch this cartoon from Japan? Oh, I don't like cartoon. That's that Disney kid stuff. Oh, nah, man. I'm telling you, this is nuts.
It was nuts.
And then you see that for the first time. And you're just like, oh, there's blood in this? It's like, wait. Just wait.
Yeah, there's a lot in this film.
There's a lot in this film. And I absolutely love it. 2 bits. And before we finish up our discussion grading, I can't believe I forgot to ask this at the top of the episode, but which version of the movie did you watch?
I believe, I didn't fully double check it or anything, but I believe I watched the original dub.
The original English dub?
Yes.
Okay, I have to know about this because I watched the Japanese dub, the original Japanese, and I know there have been multiple English dubs of this. The second one I've heard is actually really good, but Grady, I've heard the first one isn't so great. What was the dub like?
Maybe I did have the later version. I don't know. I don't have any massive complaints from it. There wasn't a huge amount of talking, unless that's what they did and they neutered it by having a lot less talking, but I don't remember ever thinking that the dub was horrendous. So maybe I did have the later re-release, or my standards for dubbing is a lot lower.
It's okay. I could throw anime because I think the recent dub does have some well-known voices in there. However, I'm not sure if you would recognize them. Like, I'm pretty sure Johnny Young Bosch shows up in the dub. I say, looking for.
I don't recognize voices. Remember what we already said? We shoot on ones and we talk about that. We don't use our ear holes.
Yes, we do not have ear holes. That is a very well-established fact for us.
I didn't take music class at high school. I took film and TV.
So before we close this out, anything else you wanted to bring up?
Just that if you are taking year 11 film and television in New Zealand, please just remember to clean your camera with a soft bristled brush and a lint-free cloth.
It's a very specific demographic that you threw that out on.
Someone might find it useful and they might pass that unit standard test.
I think that's going to be it for us today. And Grady, what's the next? Because I kept thinking that I know, because I think I know what the next film is, and I keep thinking to myself, oh man, I can't wait till we do this one. It's going to be next. Oh wait, we have a different film. Okay, but it's got to be after that. Oh, I guess we're not doing it. Oh, it's got to be after that. So please tell me, Grady, what is the next film we're going to be doing?
The next film we will be doing, let me click it over here and then click over here and then type some stuff. It's the fourth episode of our animation piece, our animation season, the finale of our animation season, I can't do math quickly, 12th episode overall, the episode after Akira, the episode before the next season. And it will be the episode that comes out at the start of July. And it's just some weird animated film that came out in the same year as Akira, but not anime, 1988. And I think it's about some weird sunken city or something.
Grady, that movie did not come out in 1988.
Look, I tried to throw you
2000s.
off.
I knew you would throw me off. I'm just like, wait, it came out nearly 20 years after this one, Grady. Do not throw that at me. I know the schedule. I know what's coming up.
This is the last movie you know is coming up.
Yes, after that, it's going to be a wild ride from there on out. But Grady, what is the title of the film we're going to be covering in the next episode?
It is Atlantis, The Lost Empire.
I am really looking forward to this
For
one.
what Campion has called the longest episode of the podcast yet, I promise it.
Probably. There's a lot to go over in that film, and now that I've built it up so much, I know you're gonna hate it, because every film that I knew you were gonna like, you ended up hating. I didn't think you would like Akira. I thought you would hate it like you did with Ghost in the Shell, but no, you ended up liking it a lot. So I don't know what your tastes are. You're just a wild. You're the podcast wild card.
Who knows what I like? Maybe it depends on the day.
Oh, because I thought, oh yeah, this is a kind of movie great. Because have you seen Atlantis?
As a kid, I have not seen it since.
Okay, I have seen it a few times since, and I think you'll like it. But you're gonna watch it, and you're like, this is crap. I hated it. This was a dumb idea for a last episode. You ruined the podcast.
You won't, because I know what's coming up after Atlantis.
Hey, I know at some point we cover They Live, and I'm looking forward to that a lot. Absolute classic.
Also came out in 1988.
Did it?
I don't know.
Stop saying everything came out in 1988.
Yes, They Live came out in 1988.
You're kidding me. No, you cannot be that lucky.
Nailed it.
You are. Oh! Oh, you lucky bastard.
Send us home, Campion.
Thank you everyone for joining us here on what's called Theatre Lantern on Cult Potato, the cult movie podcast. Thank you for joining us talking about Akira, seminal classic. My name is Campion, and I of course am joined by my good buddy Grady. This has been the Lexicon of Law, and I hope we see you all next time.
I never got a crazy intro. I made it the whole way through the episode.
Next time, Grady. Keeping you waiting. Also, I forgot.